Hi, everybody. I'm Sean McDade. I'm founder and CEO of PeopleMetrics. I'm very excited to be here today.
And Stuart.
I'm Stuart Sullivan, Chief Development Officer of Shriners Children's, based here in Tampa, Florida.
Great. So, Stuart, tell us a little bit about your role and kind of how we got here. Very interesting.
So, as Chief Development Officer for Shriners, I lead the fundraising program for the entire Shriners system, which is based in the US and in Canada and in Mexico. We have 21 different locations spread around the US, one in Montreal, one in Mexico City. And we raise about $500 million a year, and that has grown over time. We were founded by the Shriners fraternity about 100 years ago. This is our 100th anniversary, in fact, this year. And we focus on orthopedics, and even more so, we focus on complex orthopedics in terms of spinal and other orthopedic issues. We focus on burns, and we focus on cleft lip and palate treatment as well. And we see kids from all over the country and all over the world. Last year, we treated about 141,000 patients. We're different from most other health systems in the sense that we depend almost entirely upon philanthropy to operate. In fact, about a half of our operating budget is generated through gifts every year, which makes us very different from almost every other healthcare organization in the world, let alone pediatric healthcare organizations. And so philanthropy and donors are critically important to us. They allow us to do what we do. Simply put, if we don't raise it, we don't do it.
Right. So donors are your customer. And when we talk about customer experience, we often talk about the generic term customer, but for different industries and different circumstances, there are usually specific names. So hotels call their customers guests, pharmaceutical and hospitals call their customers doctors or physicians. And you have a customer too, and it's a donor, and they're very important to you. Why the donor experience? Why is the donor experience kind of important to you and Shriners, Stuart?
Well, I mean, it goes back to our existence, first of all, and we've depended upon philanthropy since our founding 100 years ago. And so what has happened just in the last 10 years is we've become even more dependent upon philanthropy in the sense that our total fundraising has doubled in the last 10 years. Our number of donors has gone up by tenfold, and the number of transactions has gone up by 20-fold. And so what we have built is this incredible machine that has attracted, literally millions of donors. And what we have created as such is a giant transactional database. And what we're attempting to do is move from a transactional relationship with our donors, our customers, into much more of a relational sort of a basis of how we communicate and how we interact with those individuals. And we receive the overwhelming majority of our donors are individuals, not corporations and foundations, both in terms of the number of donors as well as in terms of the revenue that they generate.
Those are some amazing numbers. So, maybe we can just talk a little bit about how the program that we've been doing together, and I know we have some slides on that, but we'll walk through some of the key highlights. But sir, what led you to kind of partner with PeopleMetrics around kind of understanding better what the donor experience is and how to improve it?
Well, it was out of a vacuum of information. I mean, we really were asking ourselves the question, why do people give to us? And why do they choose to give to us over other places? We know what we heard from them circumstantially and episodically, but we didn't have any real good data to point to other than the transactional data that we have in the database. And then furthermore, we didn't know that much, relatively speaking, about the donors themselves. And so the business question that we asked ourselves was, how can we get people to tell us in mass, in a statistically valid sampling, why people give, what do they like about their giving, what do they don't like about their giving to us, who else they give to, and then also to give us information, detailed information about them from a biographical and a demographic standpoint as well. And so we created with you a great two-part survey that the first part, got into why do they give, who else they give to, those kind of motivational and attitudinal responses. And then we incentivized them to then complete the second half of the survey, which then gave us a lot of biographical and demographical information, including wealth information, because we were bold enough to ask, what's your household net worth, what's your household income, those sort of questions as well. And so we were able to garner statistically valid feedback from our donors at different levels. And then at the same time, we were able to get a smaller portion of them to tell us something about themselves, which made all of that actionable from a variety of standpoints.
I think you beautifully painted the picture of what customer experience measurement and management is and how it's different than pure market research. So you mentioned some market research type needs that you had, like you needed to understand why were they buying or why were they donating, why weren't they donating? But you're also using this to, at an individual level, to better understand your customer, your donor going forward. And you're just so the whole audience understands, what Stuart and Shriners Children's is doing is it's taking survey feedback on an individual level, and then it's improving what they know about their customer at that individual level and deepening the strength of their database, if I'm understanding that correctly.
That's exactly right. And we've made personnel decisions based upon this. We've made programmatic decisions based upon this. We have made strategic decisions, actionable, and we've used actionable data that we were gathered through this process to confirm our suspicions, and then to also then say, well, this is the justification for us investing in these areas that we were thinking we were going to invest in anyway, but this gave us the confidence to make those decisions from a budgetary standpoint and from a programmatic standpoint.
Right. And at an individual level, you can only continue to get better at that, right? Because donors' situations changes. And so, as you get more information, I'd imagine like that's almost a cumulative effect as, you're getting to know them better and better over time.
Absolutely.
All right, let's move on to a slide or two, Audrey. Right. So Stuart, I wonder if you could just give the audience just a high level overview of these three kind of programs that you've worked with us on, and kind of what did you get out of each one at
Absolutely. So the first and foremost, anybody in the fundraising world knows that 90% or 95% of your revenue comes from a relatively small number of donors. And so we really wanted to focus first on those donors who are high value, and we set that bar at 5,000 and above, so that then we would have a large enough sampling to then get enough responses to be able to rely upon that data. And then we wanted to juxtapose how those individuals view the world versus those between 1,000 and 5,000, seeing if there's any differences between those two cohorts, and then dropping back to a very brief survey that we used for all of our donors that then was out to a much broader audience, obviously.
Right. So people who have tuned into PeopleMetrics Live previously have heard us talk about relationship surveys and transactional surveys, and you're doing both. The relationship surveys are just for the audience, just to refresh, they tend to be a little bit longer. They focus on more parts of the experience. They have a net promoter score, which we're seeing here. I believe that's what that is, the net promoter score, which is extremely high from our experience, right, Audrey? That's a knockout of the park one.
Absolutely. Yeah, these are great.
And then what post-transactional is, it's after a specific touch point. So it's right after, I believe it's right after a donation itself. That's how it works?
Yes.
Yep.
And we're measuring the experience of that. And they definitely fit together. Like they're related, but they definitely have different purposes that you outlined really nicely. So
yeah, so I think following this, we have some highlights from some of the feedback that we got. Here, just like Sean mentioned, donors were incredibly pleased with their overall experience, but there were some opportunities highlighted that we talked to Stuart and his team about. And so, Stuart, do you want to talk about what stood out to you here?
Yeah, absolutely. What you can see here And the percentiles here at the top end in those top four, questions, those are 95 and above in terms of percentages. And so you can see that the purple here, I guess purple to me, is 5,000 and above, and the green is 1,000 and 5,000. And so what this told us, of course, is that we're really talking to one group instead of two groups. They're slightly different, but we didn't take these differences in their responses to be statistically valid or significant. And it still taught us, and we learned the same lessons from each of these individual surveys. And that is that one of the powerful things for us was when we looked at how they related to us from the donative experience, they were pleased in the sense that the ease by which they can make a gift and the speed, et cetera, what we suspected and we see here is that we didn't do as well where thanking our donors is concerned, communicating with them following the gift, the ability to designate their gift, and then the knowledge at the bottom, even more so, how their donation is being used. And all of this in the development world, the fundraising world, falls under the rubric of stewardship. And so we suspected ahead of time that we had some issues with stewardship. And of course, here it is in purple and green or black and white. And so, we knew that we needed to make some changes in the way that we were relating to our donors, not in how we're asking them or allowing them to give so much in how we're communicating with them and reinforcing. And just as a side note, in looking at other statistics, both broad-based as within these cohorts, our first year donor to second year donor retention is not what it should be. And that's a direct feedback and directly related to what we're seeing here, in the sense that if we're thanking them more effectively and more meaningfully to them, if we are communicating with them, if we're communicating how their donation is being used, then of course we're going to have a higher retention rate from year 1 to year 2 in that critical year, and keeping a donor more than 1 year from in being a single time donor as being a repeat donor, which is of course the holy grail of what we're all trying to get, is for people to give to us and then stay with us from that point forward, the old repeat customer sort of thing.
Definitely. And for the audience, they've heard us talk before about the pillars of customer experience are a frictionless experience with as little effort as possible. And you can see here that Shriners Children's is doing a very good job in terms of level of effort required, the ease to make the donation, how quick it is. These are the pillars of a great experience. The other pillar is an empathetic kind of response after an experience, where it seems like with the thanking you, that's the opportunity a little bit for improvement, although those numbers are still pretty high. And knowing where your money is going is another, I think, dimension of empathy. Like if you're going to give, you need to know where it's going. So just wanted to kind of ground the audience on that. And even though we're talking about donor experience, it's basically the pillars of CX, customer experience, apply.
And just for the audience's benefit, I mean, the sheer N that we're talking about here is in the tens of thousands in terms of this cohort that we're talking to. And so we're not talking to 100 people or even 1,000 people. We're talking to tens of thousands of individuals here.
Excellent. All right. Why don't we get to the next one? Yes.
So this one we found fascinating. Again, it's the same cohort, and we asked folks first, what other types of organizations do you give to? And we, had the typical listing of types of nonprofit organizations. If they chose healthcare or pediatric healthcare, they received a follow-up question in the survey that then asked them specifically to pick which nonprofits they give to. And we knew that we have significant crossover between us and St. Jude. And it's funny because it seems like every week we get checks that are made out to St. Jude, and St. Jude gets checks that are made out to us. because we have donors who are literally putting the check in the wrong envelope.
Wow.
And so, we knew that we had serious crossover here, and we fundraise in many of the same ways. We advertise in many of the same places. It really is a competitive relationship, but in essence, it's a competitive relationship with every single organization that you see listed here on the screen. And, and philanthropy is a contact sport in the sense that we're constantly out there trying to get donors to choose to give to us, as opposed to choosing to give to another organization, or to choose to give out to us in addition to another organization. We were stunned, however, when you look at the top of that chart, to learn that the number here is that more than 50% of our donors of 5,000 and more, and 70% of our donors of 1,000 to 5,000 in this cohort responded to say that they also give to St. Jude. And so the rest of them weren't as much of a surprise to us, but that one, we knew it was going to be high, but we didn't know it was going to be that high. So it's really interesting to again have this survey confirm to us where suspicions are and were.
Yeah, so surveys like this came out of the relationship survey, just to set context. That can be used as a very effective tool to understand how the competitive offerings are, what are people considering, what are people using, how do you rank and stack up to them. And this is fascinating, Stuart, with the traction that St. Jude gets within your population, your donor population.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was so powerful that you really were confirming what you knew here, but to see it in the black and white, like you said, really makes a difference. Now you know what percentage that there really is a large population of your donors who are also contributing there, and that helps to know.
Well, this didn't really become actionable data for us because we knew this already. The way this has been helpful to us is when we get asked by governing board members, other key stakeholders, our own employees, others within the industry, whatever the case may be, what kind of crossover do we have? It's clear here that among our most generous donors, it's 50% or above. I would be curious to even take this one step further and to survey the people below 1,000 to see if it's even higher, which I would assume it would be at least this high, if not higher, at the lower level donations. People that are giving us $100 a year, or a monthly donors in particular, because we have so many monthly donors, as does St. Jude.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
So some of the things, to kind of echo what we've said already, our donors want to feel special. They want to be thanked. They want to know that they are appreciated. They also want to know how their money is being used, and exactly how them being generous to us translates into us providing high level care and an experience for our patients. Because they're making an investment in us, and they want to help children, they want to help families, and we need to make sure that we're demonstrating in real time how that's happening. And finally, as you see there, they really want to be thanked. They want to know that we appreciate it. They want to be thanked in a timely manner and an appropriate manner. The other interesting thing about our donors, and this is probably true of any donors anywhere, they're very conscious about how much we spend on our fundraising, and we need to walk that fine line between thanking them appropriately and making sure they know we appreciate their generosity, and not going overboard. And so that's an art, that's not a science. But what this told us was we need to do more than what we're doing now. And so the question is, how far do we push that before we start getting, you already thanked me 3 times, I don't need you to thank me anymore, whatever the case may be. But these are the kind of the high level messages we took away from this. And then we began to think, well, how do we make this actionable? How do we put this into motion? And then how do we manage and lead and put things in place that then allow these things to happen?
Really interesting. Okay.
So then I would say, Audrey, if we can go on to the next slide. Yeah. We began to put things in place. So we actually 2 weeks ago, we had our first quarterly insider call where we had one of our star surgeons and the physician assistant that works with him talk about how they are treating scoliosis and complex spine conditions. And it was about an hour and a half session that donors attended, where they got an inside look into what it is we do and what the patients are going through, and then how we treat patients in a way that a few other places do. And so we're going to begin these quarterly insider calls, and every time feature somebody who is directly involved in delivering care in some way, shape, or form to a patient and a family. And that could be a surgeon, that could be a nurse, that could be a physician assistant, that could be a child life specialist, that could be a prosthetic and orthotic specialist, who's designing wheelchairs to fit a person, rather than the other way around, in terms of getting a person to fit into a wheelchair, or the prosthetic devices that we provide our patients. And so, really giving people an insider view, and it's invitation only. And so, keep making these individuals feel special, that they're getting access that nobody else is getting. We also have created what we're called the Hope and Healing Society, which is nothing new within this industry in terms of having a donor recognition society, but we didn't have one for our generous annual donors. And so we have created this and are in the process of launching this society that then recognizes people who give $5,000 or more. And really excited about what the early returns that we're seeing in terms of people recognizing that we're recognizing them and making them feel like they're part of something special, and that their generosity is greatly appreciated. And so there will be, special mailings and communications and events that these folks are going to be invited to. But again, it's nothing new. People in the nonprofit world have been doing these sort of societies or gift clubs or whatever the case may be for as long as philanthropy has existed. But it's something that we're putting in place to go back to and to address the relative weaknesses that we heard about through this survey work. With that, in addition to the insiders calls, we're also inviting people to live events. And thankfully, we have a number of events that we can invite folks to. The first one was last month. We had our PGA golf tournament in Las Vegas that we've done for about 15 years. And we've always invited donors to our suite. This time we broadened that invitation out to a larger group, and then invited folks to come to get free tickets to the tournament. And then out of that cohort, then we asked individuals who looked like they could do more to come into the suite, and had great experience with that. With folks responding to it, that mailer that we sent out to a fairly significant audience, in terms of the number of mailings that went out. It also was revenue positive in the sense that we raised significantly more than the mailing cost, just from people saying, I can't come to the tournament, but here's a check. And so, because we have response devices built into almost all of the things that we send out to folks. And then finally, we knew that we needed somebody to really focus on stewardship and donor relations. And we didn't, this is the first place that I've been in a chief development officer role where I haven't had somebody on the team with the title of stewardship or donor relations in their title. And so we created over the past year a new position, which is director of stewardship. And we hired that person a few months ago. And so, my message to this person is we need to design a program, and knowing that we're not going to build Rome in a day, that we need to figure out the roadmap to the point where we're going to be much more efficient and effective at stewardship going forward, and then pulling in any variety of folks across our staff around the country who are involved either directly or indirectly in stewardship. And so, really having that person wake up every morning and go to bed every night thinking about how we are communicating with our donors and making them feel like valued investors and stakeholders within the organization. So these are really 4 things that we have put in place just in the last couple of months as a direct result of the feedback that we got through this, through the survey work. I don't know that we would have been this intentional or moved this quickly if we hadn't had good data to point to in terms of being able to say, yes, this is what we're hearing and it's statistically valid, and therefore we can make decisions based upon this.
Stuart, a lot of times people struggle with, okay, what do I do with this information? How do I act on it? I think you've done an incredible job outlining specific actions taken based on donor feedback in this case that will address some of the suggestions and data that you've seen that weren't where you wanted it to be. I mean, the results weren't terrible by any means, but they were not where you wanted it to be, and you took action. So the next time we go out and measure, we can see kind of what the impact was.
Yeah, hopefully we see those numbers improving, and also that we get, really great feedback episodically from donors who are saying, and we're already seeing this, where people are saying, they recognize that we're recognizing them and they're paying attention. I mean, one of the people that we invited to come to the golf tournament, she didn't qualify at first to come into the suite based upon her past giving. But when we looked at her a little bit more closely, we invited her to come to the suite. And she had a phenomenal time. She drove 4 hours from California to Vegas by herself to go to the golf tournament. And then she told us that she had been giving to us for over 30 years, but she'd been doing so through the combined federal campaign. So we never knew she was a donor because her money got amalgamated, combined with all the other federal employees who were giving to us. But she had made gifts on her own since then, since she retired. And then right after the golf tournament, she bought 2 tickets to our gala that is next Saturday in Houston, Texas, our 100th anniversary gala. And so, here's somebody that we recognized her. We recognized her giving. We thanked her. We brought her into a closer relationship experience with us and an actual experiential. And then she immediately followed up with another donation and to buy tickets. And now she's going to fly from California to Texas next week to attend this gala, which is director of stewardship. And we hired that person a few months ago. And so, my message to this person is we need to design a program, and knowing that we're not going to build Rome in a day, that we need to figure out the roadmap to the point where we're going to be much more efficient and effective at stewardship going forward, and then pulling in any variety of folks across our staff around the country who are involved either directly or indirectly in stewardship. And so, really having that person wake up every morning and go to bed every night thinking about how we are communicating with our donors and making them feel like valued investors and stakeholders within the organization. So these are really 4 things that we have put in place just in the last couple of months as a direct result of the feedback that we got through this, through the survey work. I don't know that we would have been this intentional or moved this quickly if we hadn't had good data to point to in terms of being able to say, yes, this is what we're hearing and it's statistically valid, and therefore we can make decisions based upon this.
Stuart, a lot of times people struggle with, okay, what do I do with this information? How do I act on it? I think you've done an incredible job outlining specific actions taken based on donor feedback in this case that will address some of the suggestions and data that you've seen that weren't where you wanted it to be. I mean, the results weren't terrible by any means, but they were not where you wanted it to be, and you took action. So the next time we go out and measure, we can see kind of what the impact was.
Yeah, hopefully we see those numbers improving, and also that we get, really great feedback episodically from donors who are saying, and we're already seeing this, where people are saying, they recognize that we're recognizing them and they're paying attention. I mean, one of the people that we invited to come to the golf tournament, she didn't qualify at first to come into the suite based upon her past giving. But when we looked at her a little bit more closely, we invited her to come to the suite. And she had a phenomenal time. She drove 4 hours from California to Vegas by herself to go to the golf tournament. And then she told us that she had been giving to us for over 30 years, but she'd been doing so through the combined federal campaign. So we never knew she was a donor because her money got amalgamated, combined with all the other federal employees who were giving to us. But she had made gifts on her own since then, since she retired. And then right after the golf tournament, she bought 2 tickets to our gala that is next Saturday in Houston, Texas, our 100th anniversary gala. And so, here's somebody that we recognized her. We recognized her giving. We thanked her. We brought her into a closer relationship experience with us and an actual experiential. And then she immediately followed up with another donation and to buy tickets. And now she's going to fly from California to Texas next week to attend this gala, which is director of stewardship. And we hired that person a few months ago. And so, my message to this person is we need to design a program, and knowing that we're not going to build Rome in a day, that we need to figure out the roadmap to the point where we're going to be much more efficient and effective at stewardship going forward, and then pulling in any variety of folks across our staff around the country who are involved either directly or indirectly in stewardship. And so, really having that person wake up every morning and go to bed every night thinking about how we are communicating with our donors and making them feel like valued investors and stakeholders within the organization. So these are really 4 things that we have put in place just in the last couple of months as a direct result of the feedback that we got through this, through the survey work. I don't know that we would have been this intentional or moved this quickly if we hadn't had good data to point to in terms of being able to say, yes, this is what we're hearing and it's statistically valid, and therefore we can make decisions based upon this.
Stuart, a lot of times people struggle with, okay, what do I do with this information? How do I act on it? I think you've done an incredible job outlining specific actions taken based on donor feedback in this case that will address some of the suggestions and data that you've seen that weren't where you wanted it to be. I mean, the results weren't terrible by any means, but they were not where you wanted it to be, and you took action. So the next time we go out and measure, we can see kind of what the impact was.
Yeah, hopefully we see those numbers improving, and also that we get, really great feedback episodically from donors who are saying, and we're already seeing this, where people are saying, they recognize that we're recognizing them and they're paying attention. I mean, one of the people that we invited to come to the golf tournament, she didn't qualify at first to come into the suite based upon her past giving. But when we looked at her a little bit more closely, we invited her to come to the suite. And she had a phenomenal time. She drove 4 hours from California to Vegas by herself to go to the golf tournament. And then she told us that she had been giving to us for over 30 years, but she'd been doing so through the combined federal campaign. So we never knew she was a donor because her money got amalgamated, combined with all the other federal employees who were giving to us. But she had made gifts on her own since then, since she retired. And then right after the golf tournament, she bought 2 tickets to our gala that is next Saturday in Houston, Texas, our 100th anniversary gala. And so, here's somebody that we recognized her. We recognized her giving. We thanked her. We brought her into a closer relationship experience with us and an actual experiential. And then she immediately followed up with another donation and to buy tickets. And now she's going to fly from California to Texas next week to attend this gala. And so I can see real-time examples just like that of people taking action based upon what we're doing now.
I often think, Stuart and Audrey, about, what's the impact of the war on the world of customer experience? And I think this is an example of you're creating better experiences for your donors who are donating to your organization, which then are helping so many people in this world. And it's like a higher order kind of role for customer experience for me when we think of these things. And we also work with, you know, in healthcare spaces that are similar, that I often tell Audrey, you know, this is the most important work we do because we're helping people serve other people who are in need. And I think this is just a great example of it.
Yeah, and the challenge for us is just the volume that we deal with, because, you know, we have, you know, literally millions of donors who have given to us in the last couple of years, and they've given us tens of millions of transactions. And how do you, I wish we could communicate with all of them the same way that we're attempting to communicate with this upper tier cohort, but it's just impossible to do so. But more importantly, from a business model perspective, we have to figure out who we focus on. And that's where that qualitative demographic information comes in, because we are so severely understaffed compared to the size of our donor population that, you know, I could double, triple, I could increase the size of our staff by tenfold, and we would still not have enough people. So the point being, we have to figure out a way to make the 150 people that work in this office more efficient and effective than they've ever been before, because we have to arm them with better information and better data so that then they can figure out, who do I focus on today, this week, this month, this year. So, you know, so that then those who can put an extra 0 or 2 at the end of their check or their transaction amount, or may eventually include us in their estate plan, which many donors do.
Yeah.
Then that's what we're shooting for, is that kind of deeper relationship that then the donors stay with us for a long period of time, just like the lady who's flying to Houston next week.
Right. And feedback, like everybody wants to be thanked, you're able to then make that more potentially a scalable activity across all of your donors, right? Because some things you can do across all, and
Absolutely.
others need a much more personal touch, obviously, with the higher value donor.
Absolutely, because we can repurpose things that we're doing for the upper level folks and make it accessible, those same things accessible to the entire donor population.
Hey, Stuart, we have a couple of questions. Let's see if we can get to them. One from an audience member is, what level of donation gets a donor into the insider calls?
So it is not a simple answer to that question, because at the same time that we are thanking and recognizing the folks who are already at that $5,000 and above level, we've done a lot of data work to model who could give at that level, but isn't giving at that level now. So we invite the upper level cohort of that group to participate in those quarterly calls, in addition to anybody who's already at the $5,000 and above. So the simple part of the answer is 5,000 and above. The more complex is we're inviting a multiple of them, because we want others to see this and then to want to be a part of the club as well. So we're using it as a prospecting tool, and as well as a recognition tool.
That's great.
Very interesting. All right, and I have one more here, and it's where do we go from here? What does the future hold for creating exceptional donor experiences?
Well, I mean, the info, you can see that we've already had great actionable data that came out of this, and you know, I want more of the same. Obviously, we want to dive into how do the people below 1,000 think about us and feel about us. In addition to that, we have a voracious appetite for qualitative data. So we're trying to gather and grab as much qualitative data about the 8 million people in our database as possible. And so, you know, anything that we can do to get people to respond to surveys like this and to give us that kind of qualitative demographic information is critical for us. And then we'll continue to test themes, and then to, you know, try to get people to tell us where their pain points are, and to see if we've made any progress in addressing those pain points, in terms of, are we thanking them more appropriately? But on the, you know, the flip side of that coin is, are we doing too much? Does it look like we're going overboard? And where does that sweet spot occur in terms of us being able to recognize people in an appropriate way that is enough but not too much?
That's great.
Just little things like that, you know.
Right. Well, Stuart, this has been such a great overview of the donor feedback program and your experience. Thank you so much for sharing your time and expertise with us today. We'll have to have you back again so we can talk about sort of where you've gone from here and, you know, what you found that works and what doesn't and what we've all learned from it. Thank you to all our attendees for joining this afternoon, and we'll get the recording of this session out soon. And have a great day, everyone. Thank you.